John Avilla is the founder of Sound Union, a creative studio and cultural hub designed for people who see music in terms of well-being, inspiration, and connection. With a background in brand strategy and creative direction, John built Sound Union as a new kind of social club for creatives, entrepreneurs, and thinkers who prioritize music as a vital part of their daily lives and identities. John shared a deep understanding and appreciation for the nature and benefits of music. So persuasive, I bought a bass guitar and signed up for lessons the day after we spoke. I'm really hoping I can visit Sound Union one day in Redwood City, California, and they might even let me play. Here's my conversation with John. I wanted to thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you because there aren't that many musicians that I've been able to speak with. And then you have this whole other interesting side to what you do. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about it.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I did notice that. And, we that's a form of art and collaboration and community and all of that. So thanks for the chance to talk about it.
No, absolutely. And so we can jump right in if you wanted to share a little bit about Sound Union and what you're trying to achieve through that.
As you said, musicians kind of lack a space for community. At least I'm in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley, and I've always used music as a release, from the high pressure work space, et cetera. It was an easy way to recharge batteries, but learned over the 30 years or so of doing it that it takes a long time to build up a community of people who are sort of like-minded or like to play the same things and that you could play with. So about 6 or 7 years ago, got to thinking there's got to be a better way to connect with others without the anxiety, without the auditioning and things like that. And looking around, there are places for people to connect around sports, around other activities like, painting. And I thought, well, let's try to create that for musicians and create a space that's safe and open because it's a pretty vulnerable art. I mean, you are out there when you're playing. So how do we create a cool space that makes it easier to do that? We have folks of all levels and we try to foster this environment. There's always somebody who can lift you up and there's always somebody you can lift up. And that's kind of some of the magic that has happened here that keeps me going, actually. I can't tell you why or how that happens, at least in my experiences, but I had this wonderful mentor who all he did was in one short conversation, we were, mentored for a year or so. In one short conversation, as I was an executive creative director at the time in charge of about 20 people, and he said, look, man, your job is not to win the awards anymore. Your job is to create an environment where your team can do the best work of their lives. And he said it that way. He didn't say win awards because, we like awards, but he said create an environment where they can do the best work of their lives. And if you can't, then you got to help them find a place that they can do that in. That just went into my professional DNA when he said that. I don't know why, but it just clicked. And when my business partner and I, who both have been in the ad industry, we've worked together for 19 years now, almost 20 years. When we were talking about the environment we want to create here, that was central, right? How do you create an environment where somebody can walk in and go, wow, it's not the only place I play music. We certainly want to be the favorite place. That's part of it. But if we create a feeling or create an environment with, equipment and people and culture and amenities where people feel like, man, that's the best work I'm doing. I think that not only is a wonderful thing, but it's a pretty sticky thing.
I mean, definitely a lot of it probably has to do with you and your team really believing passionately in the benefits of music for the people playing and for the people who are experiencing it, listening to it. Can you talk a little bit about what you see that strength of, because I have a quote from you that says, music is a keystone of life. And I loved that because it speaks to just how fundamental it is to us as a language that's separate from visual language or verbal language. And I'm not going to remember this at all now, but somewhere a long time ago, I listened to a podcast where they talked about how music predated verbal language. So sound making, just like mark making and sound making predated, our verbal language. So it's fundamental.
Yeah, and I do I absolutely correct. I think that you can see that it would predate formal shapes and forms of letters and sounds and those strung together. It is really, in a lot of ways, primal. There's some magic about sitting around a campfire and singing and playing guitar and listening. I mean, music is not just about performing where the benefits are created, but I think it is a form of communication that is pretty fundamental, right, to us. And I think that's also why there's so many shapes and forms of it that people grok onto. So yeah, I think that's part of the longevity and the impact that it has in our cultural spaces, because it is so sort of natural to us as a form of expression and a form of communication.
I know, just from looking around a bit, that there's evidence of the cognitive benefits of
Oh yeah.
music. So it stimulates you mentally, intellectually. And also, just within the last 24 hours, I have somehow fallen down the hole of music therapy, which I didn't know was a thing. But therapists using music as opposed to talk therapy or other forms of art therapy, using music as a way to help address trauma, reduce anxiety, all those other things. Does in your community, do people talk about music in those kinds of ways about the benefits?
The short answer is yes. And I'll give you an example. My business partner and I have a longtime friend who is the chair of an organization. You talk about the cathartic, the restorative, the health benefits of music. I think there's no better example than I'll give him a little plug. There's a group out of Nashville called Songwriting with Soldiers, and this is a group that has gathered a stable of the best songwriters in Nashville, trained them to work with veterans who have PTSD. And there's a 3-day journey that they take, and they write music and do other things as part of the restorative process. They've been doing it a little over 11 years now. They have over 2,500 songs that have been written, and they are some of the most amazing songs you will ever hear. And then when you hear the stories of the veterans behind the songs, and they collaborate with these songwriters, it's complete evidence that, oh my God, this music literally saves some lives in those cases. And I talked to at least one of the vets who's come through the program, and he's like, yeah, man, I mean, it saved my life being able to express in music the experience that I had. So I think that's like the most intense example. But there are examples every day where it can relieve stress. I have some of my members are busy execs, and they have 200 people at work they're responsible for. They've got a family of 5, 6 people at home they're responsible for, and they'll come here, go into a room with their instrument, close the door, draw the curtains, and come out 2 hours later and tell me, "Wow, that's my therapy. That's what I needed to kind of just shake off some of the pressure and get back out there." So I think it can be little things like that and really serious and have massive impact as well. That I'll say too, as a driver for what I do and sort of my own transformation, I spent a career, selling widgets, tech, and prosumer
I
testing.
teach people how to use widgets, so I can relate.
Yeah, yeah. And it's fun and all of that. But, I got to a point where it's like, okay, I'm doing that and I'm okay at that, and jobs come and go. And when in discussion with my business partner, we kind of landed on what are our passions around and what drives us, and formulated this idea for the business. The feeling of accomplishment that I have in just creating this space and seeing other people use it and the impact that it has, it's a lot better than knowing that I sold, 2 million units of X or Y, right? Or help
Yeah.
sell. Yeah.
It does sound, though, that you were able to bring a lot of your experience and skills from that part of your life, that business, into the business that you have now. So it served you well to bring you to the point where you had what you needed to be able to run a business like that.
Yeah, definitely some advantages there, right? Spending 30 years. I started really working on this business in my mid 50s. And I had a startup in my early 30s that went with the bubble and first .com rise, and learned a lot from that experience, because it was ultimately the business didn't last, but I won't call it a failure, because we learned quite a bit about business and how to, and ourselves, et cetera. But I do, and I'll dial back the ego part of this, but I do think there is some valid point that this business wouldn't have been created, couldn't thrive without the perspective that my partner Tom and I share, and in being in a service business for our careers, in understanding how to foster creativity in an ad agency, in understanding how to, and learning how to not dictate to people, but direct people, right? If you're a creative dictator, not a creative director, people don't like working with you, and your idea is not always the best anyway. So if you're open to other people and their ideas, I've learned to say, I shouldn't say always, I've learned to say there's 100 ways to solve the problem. It doesn't have to be my way, right? So I think having that perspective, I also humbly would say that as a bass player and a backing vocalist, not a front person, I bring a perspective. As a bass player, you're back there to form the foundation with the drummer and the rhythm section, right, and the keys, so that the song really has that strong foundation. And people mostly focus on the lead singer or the front person, right? I think I would have a different approach to this business if I had my music experience was around being a front man, or and I don't think it would be the same thing. I don't think it would be as compelling for people to come in and feel like the business isn't here to support them, right? So I think combining all those years of experience in the marketing world and trying to create an environment for others to succeed in that realm definitely is a huge part of an approach to art, an approach to music that we try to manifest here.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting for you to see that parallel in terms of your role as a background foundational person who's supporting the lead people. There was a question that was right on the table. It's just flown away. But it was related to what you were just saying. But how about, for the moment, I just ask you, I know what it was. How did you manage to balance what I imagine was you said you were very competitive. I'm sure you spent hours and hours at work in your business life. How did you balance that with time to devote to playing music, which is, I have dabbled. I can never get consistent enough where I'm playing regularly enough that I can actually do anything. So I pluck, I go to bed, I put it down, I pluck it. I have never been able to be, and in my drawing too, like I just can't seem to carve out that time and creative energy
Yeah.
with what I invested or I have up to this point, because I think 25 to 30 years is a tipping point for being ready to move into another direction.
Yeah.
I have never been able to balance those things.
Well, you have three aspects to that question.
Sorry, that was the question you're not
Well,
supposed to ask. It was a multi-pronged question.
oh no, I like it, and I'll try to break it down because I think it's an important one, especially on the path to how we were impacting our lives. You've done some great podcasts on what's the thread, or work life balance and habits, and part of it was the realization that I did, and again, matched well with my business partner. We worked a lot. We didn't. There's especially in a creative business, you can't really just turn it off. It's not. You don't punch out at 5 and stop thinking about the problems that you have to solve. So we had that sort of career behavior, not without its impacts, not without its impact at home and things like that. But there was the realization, yeah, no matter what job I have, it's kind of, I hope it's not workaholic, but I think it is that, I'm always, you think about stuff and how to solve it. So there's that aspect of it. And so then how do you carve out time for music? Well, it was most of my music play was integrated with some activity through my kids' school or something like that. So there were parents, once your kids start going to school, a lot of us, mom and dad's bands players, start out. Although I did get into some pretty good bands that would perform at corporate gigs and weddings and things like that. But it started with the parents. You're together for 8 years in grammar school, or 9 years from kindergarten to 8th grade, and there's always school activities that needs a band. So you kind of get pulled into it that way, and then you start having fun, and there are bars to play at. So it really starts to absorb some of that extra energy and free time. Then you realize it's recharging for the rest of your life, right? To have that time. I also like to say that self-care is not selfish. So music is part of that catharsis and self-care. So it becomes a thing you make time for out of the hours that you have. Again, I'll admit, it doesn't come without time that's not spent elsewhere. If I hadn't been in music, yeah, I probably would have had more time at home. I'm luckily 35 years married, and my wife is patient and tolerant to certain degrees, as we all are after this long of a marriage, I'll admit. But yeah, you kind of it becomes a priority. Your priorities adapt, so that's how you find the time.
I think, and sometimes I speak from my experience, and I think that other people have the same experience. So it's not necessarily the case, but I think there's something to it about also, because I'll spend the time watching TV, right? Like it's not that I don't have the time, but sometimes I end up, it's more passive, or I'll read, right? Because there's certain things I can do where the barrier to entry for me is very low. I could watch TV, I could watch a movie, I don't cook because I'm really not a good cook. The barrier to entry is high for me. So the energy and the thought it takes to engage in that is challenging for me. So every time I look at my guitar hanging on the wall, I think, okay, but you know what? Ugh, my fingers, I don't have the things callous anymore. And then am I going to remember how to do this? And then I'm going to get upset with myself because I'm starting off from scratch again. And then the barrier to entry for me just seems sort of insurmountable. And I go click, click, and I watch an episode of Top Chef or something, which is, it's fun, but it's not taking me anywhere.
I totally identify. And I think there are, many in our world today who would say the same thing and identify with that. I do take it as a challenge. I because it is easy, especially after long days, you're tired. Do I want to engage my cognitive stuff? So there is allowing the time and understanding when, I like the muse hits, right? No matter what, if your muse is your creative muscles are in the morning or in the evening, it's going to be hard to get those fired up in opposite that. So a little bit of sensitivity or a little bit of awareness of when do I like to read or when do I like to do X, Y, and Z helps a little bit. The other struggle, I'm by no means like overcome any of this stuff, is hearing that I'm giving myself permission not to versus, all right, where am I kind of encouraging myself to, right? And overcoming that. It's so easy. We have so many distractions on our phones and TV that are, certainly I struggle with it as well because it's, all right, just 10 or 15 minutes and I'm just going to turn off for a little while. And then that turns into 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And I don't know, I don't have any secret pills on how to combat that other than will. And maybe that's not the best one. I'm open to hearing, what are the other tools we can put in our time and emotional budget to overcome some of those distractions.
One of the things that I have only just started approaching, and I'm nowhere done with this yet, but I was thinking the other day about like, what are my values? And not doing that personal branding thing, because I've seen that, but more just like my heartfelt values, and just write a bunch of them down. And then look at them and say, but really prioritize, like, what are a couple that really do feel, not just that I feel like I should be doing that, but I really, really do. I'm attuned to those values. And then look quite carefully at how I spend my time and say, am I aligned with those values? And either I have to give them up and consciously say, actually, you may think that's something you want, but you're not doing the things. So shelve that, focus your energy on the things you're doing that feel that you can commit to, that will then embody these values in your life. And then what activities in your day will help you be that person? And so then the interview I saw this morning just randomly was somebody saying, I looked at myself of where I was, and I looked at who I wanted to be. And if you're really honest with yourself about what those are, he goes, I'm just trying to bring that guy a little closer. So a little closer to who I want to be instead of just who I am today, and just keep growing and keep developing and keep challenging, but in a way that's kind of, I'm hopeful, is just kind of like gentle, because this is what I'm really aligned to. This is something I want to grow into. How can I get there?
Is this now a therapy session?
Yeah, I know. I feel like I've gone off. Okay, let's go back to music.
No, I like it. I like it because, again, it is how does, it's a question that you have to be prepared for the answer, right? And I will say that in a startup phase, I have shelved some parts of that push of who I want to be, or say, okay, well, I can kind of put that pursuit of that aspect on hold a little bit. And I think for many entrepreneurs, certainly ones that I've talked to and know, that challenge, and I'm living it, is, all right, well, I'm giving more to the business than I am to my family right now. And how long can I sustain that without, giving up too much? And I think I think creative people face that all the time, because whatever the creative pursuit is, starting a business, painting, composing, for those aspects, it's kind of there is a selfish aspect to it, right? Because it becomes a little bit engrossing to make sure something has a good foundation to start, can then go off and thrive. So that by fact of time and space and energy, you're giving up other things. So it's a pretty deep question you have or at least.
I'm going to rein it back now. I'm
Oh,
going to
no,
leave the therapy space.
I know, but in a conversation of how to pursue art and how to pursue, I think entrepreneurism is art in a lot of ways. People are creating, sometimes, people are really creating something new. You have to acknowledge there is a little bit of sacrifice. Hopefully you meter it and it's not too big.
But, to try to pull the thread back through, the fact that you've started a community for musicians, you've made a space that does lower that barrier, because as soon as you start making connections with people and have relationships, then it becomes mutually, like you said, like the 25-year-old brings up the 56-year-old maybe one time, and the 72-year-old might bring up the 14-year-old, or whatever that looks like. You're putting yourself in a space where it's not just your effort alone. You're engaging with other people who have similar kind of perspective on or interest in something.
Sure.
So
sure, that shared aspect. Yeah.
Yeah.
That community, the value there.
Absolutely.
I've admitted this to most of my investors. Only and not all. Well, I have, now that I think about it, all of them. When I wrote the business plan, it was about the place and the space and the equipment and the opportunity. And here we're going to create something that, people will come in. I knew there would be a community aspect. I built online communities before. This is a real community, or a physical community, but I grossly underestimated the value that you just talked about. When people come in and they connect through music, there's a connection there that there are few other places in our lives where you can connect with people that deeply, that quickly. I've seen strangers come into a session, play music for 2 or 3 hours, and they are hugging goodbye, saying, when can we do this again? And when I saw that start to happen in my kind of market research, I was running studio sessions and things like that. It's pretty powerful. And yeah, community is a huge thing. I think as the world gets more and more access to information, any kind you want, we're actually shrinking in a lot of ways, and using that access to find the people who think and act and, the way we do. I think in some cases that's not helpful to the world at large. I like to think that around music, it is pretty helpful as people find a common ground and a common experience that they can share regardless of their backgrounds in a music studio. So that aspect of community, I think, is one of the key positive things that we're sending out in the world here.
You can learn more about John and Sound Union at soundunion.com, on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/company/soundunion, or follow @Join Sound Union on Instagram.